Wata hulakan ni.
Brief history of Mindanao. Mindanao Island, the second largest in the Philippines, in the southern part of the archipelago, surrounded by the Bohol, Philippines, Celebes, and Sulu Seas. Irregularly shaped, it measures 239 miles or 471 kilometers north to south, and 324 miles 521 kilometers east to west. The island is marked by peninsulas. It is heavily indented by the Davao and Moro Gulfs in the south and by the Iligan Bay in the north. Respectively, ridge, faulted mountains, and volcanoes occur in many areas. Mount Apo at 9,692 feet or 2,954 meters is an active volcano in the southern part of the Central Highlands. It is the highest peak in the Philippines. The island has narrow coastal plains, and the Mindanao and Agusan river systems from broad, fertile basins and extensive swamps. Lake Lanao, Lake Sultan Alonto, created by a lava dam, has an area of 134 square miles or 347 square kilometers. The island has marsh game refuge and bird sanctuary. The rare Philippine eagle is found on Mindanao.
Mindanao has been considered the country's pioneer's frontier because of its large expanse of undeveloped fertile lands. It did not experience substantial population increase until migration was promoted, particularly in the mid-20th century. The chief crops are corn, rice, abaca, bananas, pineapples, mangoes, and coconut. Cotton, rami, a fiber plant, coffee, and cacao are also grown. The timber industry is important, and there are gold, nickel, iron, and coal deposits. Chartered cities include Zamboanga, Cotabato City, Davao City, Cagayan de Oro, and Butuan. Area 36,537 square miles or 94,630 square kilometers. Mindanao also has the largest concentration of ethnic minorities in the Philippines. They include the Maguindanao, Maranao, Ilanon, Sangil. These are all Muslim groups, sometimes collectively called the Moro. Groups usually found in the upland include the Tiboli, Subanon, Bukidnon, Bagubo, Mandaya, and Manubo. Another significant group is the Tiruray, whose religion is a mixture of Christians, Muslims, and local beliefs. Mindanao is a Muslim outpost in the predominantly Roman Catholic Philippines. Although Muslims are no longer a majority, Islamic culture is evident. There are many mosques and unique brassware, including the Kris or dagger. The autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao consisting of territory in western and southwestern Mindanao, along with some nearby islands, including Tawi-Tawi and Hulu, was established in 1990.
Mindanao derived its name from the Maguindanaoans and constituted the largest sultanate. Maps made during the 17th and 18th centuries suggest that the name was used to refer to the island by the natives at the time. Evidence of human occupation in Mindanao dates back to tens of thousands of years. In prehistoric times, the Negrito people arrived sometime around 1500 BC. Austronesian people spread throughout the Philippines and far beyond. Native people of the Maluku Island refer to the island of Maluku Bizar, or the Great Mucas. Upon the Spaniards' arrival in the Philippines, they were dismayed to find such a strong Muslim presence on the island, having just expelled the Moors from Spain after centuries of fighting. In fact, the name Moros, the Spanish word for Moors, was given to the Muslim inhabitants by the Spanish. Kaisara Karuli was the name given by the Valulubus to the island of Mindanao when he reached the sea near it. Water Wars. 1901 to 1913, in Philippine history was a series of scattered campaigns involving American troops in northern bands in Mindanao, Philippines. The motto fought for religious rather than political reasons, and their actions were unconnected with those of the people revolutionaries who conducted the Philippine-American War in 1899 to 1902. Before the colonization, migrants from the neighboring Asian countries also occupied Zamboanga. Like any other island of the Philippines, the Sobanons from the Malay origin was known to be the early people in the peninsula. Throughout the Spanish regime, Zamboanga became the capital and the seat of the Gobierno Politico-Militar for the entire Mindanao. Zamboanga also became the Spanish garrison because its strategic location. Hence, Zamboanga has opened its port to international maritime trading with the rest of the European countries during the 18th century, which resulted in better economic opportunities. The beginnings of Davao as a distinct geopolitical entity started during the last 50 years of Spanish rule in the country. The conquest of the Davao Gulf area in 1848 paved the way for the establishment of a Spanish de facto government in Davao, although as early as 1620, Spanish sovereignty already reigned in the northeastern coast of the Mindanao down to Bislig. In 1848, Don Jose Cruz de Yancoren, a native of Vergara, Spain, received a special grant from Don Narcisco Claveria, the Governor-General of the archipelago. He was ordered to conquer and subdue the entire Gulf district, expel or pacify the Moros, and establish the Christian religion. Yancoren arrived in Davao as head of a colonizing expedition comprising 17 men and women. They found an ally in Dato Gopan chief, who saw in Yancoren's colonizing venture a chance to get even with Dato Bago, a Muslim head of Davao Gulf, who had treated the Mandayas as vassals. Yancoren's initial attack against Dato Bago's fortified settlement at the mouth of Davao River proved fatal. His ships could not maneuver in the narrow channel of the Raba River bend, where Bolton Bridge is now located, and were forced to retreat. He erected a barrier at Payapi for his defense and constructed a causeway across Nipa swamps to the dry section of the meadows, now at Lavria Strait Junction, to bring his cannons within range to Dato Bago's settlement. In the 3 months that he devoted to constructing the causeway, Yancorens had also to fend off Dato Bago's harassing attacks against the workers. Finally, late in June, help came from the Zamboanga. Don Manuel, a Navy commanding general, arrived with a company of infantry and joined in the attack against Dato Bago's settlement. The outgunned defenders, despite their tenacious resistance, finally fled to different Muslim communities, in the hope of carrying on the fight some other day. Yancoren was reported to have peaceful possession of the Davao Gulf territory at the end of 1849, despite the lack of support from the government in Manila. And his principles in the venture, he campaigned hard among the different tribes like the Mandayas, Manobos, and others, urging them to live in the settlements to reach them for trade and commerce. But to no avail, the Moros continued to threaten those who collaborated with the Spaniards. There was little economic development at the Gulf region in 1998. The Spaniards also conquered Cotabato in the 17th century. Settlements grew in the mouth of Rio Grande de Mindanao to prove of the growth of civilization in the area. Trading of basic commodities, industrial raw materials, agriculture, and aquaculture products became the center of economic activities in the area. As time passes by, the economic potentials of Cotabato grew that made it independent from the rest of the islands. Cotabato became a chartered city on June 20, 1959 by Republic Act No. 2364. Dato Manduyu Sinuswat Sr. became the first elected mayor. In the early 19th century, Americans started to penetrate Cotabato and eventually made the place as the capital town of the Kabata province. When the United States reigned over the Philippines, after the Spaniards-American War in 1989, the United States initiated a policy designed to assimilate the Moro into the Philippine nation and to curb more feudal practices such as slave trading. The attempt of the American to alter the traditional ways of the Moro resulted in rebellion. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Lumads controlled an area which now covers 17 of Mindanao's 24 provinces. But by the 1980 census, they constituted less than 6% of the population in Mindanao and Cebu. Heavy migration to Mindanao of Visayans, spurred by government-sponsored settlements programs, turned the indigenous Lumads and Moros into minorities.
Sporadic fighting took place in 1901 and 1903. Moros attacked by the American troops near Lake Lanao in Mindanao. The best known of the American-Moro battles occurred in March 1906 at the top of the Mount Daju on the island of Walo. 600 Moro who had taken refuge inside a massive volcanic crater were killed by troops under General Leonard Wood. Many women and children were killed in the fight. Wood came under severe criticism in the U.S. Congress because of that. He was later absolved of any wrongdoings by press. Theodore Roosevelt. Renewed hostilities occurred in September 1911 and June 1913. Fighting ceased after that, although Moro separatist movement continued into the 21st century. The Americans continued the colonization program on Mindanao. In the 1930s, the U.S. authorities encouraged Christians to migrate to the southern region of Mindanao, which was mostly populated by Muslims. On February 27, 1939, the 62 pioneers, or the primarily agricultural and trade graduates, were the first big batch of settlers to the land in Jinsan with the mission to industriously cultivate Jinsan's fertile expanse of land. After this first influx of pioneers, thousands more from Luzon and Visayas have subsequently migrated into the area. This movement started the displacement of some native Bilan tribes to the mountains and lost their livelihood. The migrants were on the advantaged sites, legally securing lands. The migrants made it difficult for the indigenous people and Muslims to own their farmlands because they do not have land titles to prove ownership. So, the migrants Christians usually won over land disputes that tremendously increased both their properties and their population as years passed. The Americans used their controls over property and land law to let American corporations and Christian settlers take over native resources. They deprived the Moro sultanates in the west of self-governance and independence. Ilocanos, Cebuanos, and Ilonggos streamed into Moro territories in the western and central portions of Mindanao. This resulted in armed struggles. The natives, especially those who refused to convert to Christianity, became victims of land grabbing by the migrants who were promised vast and fertile lands by the government.
Massive Filipino Christian settlements continued after the Philippines became independent from America. The Americans passed the rule to the Christian Filipinos. Land disputes between the Christian settlers and the Muslims and other tribal natives broke out into violence. Then, the Moro National Liberation Front, or MNLF, was formed. And the Moro armed insurgency against the Philippine rule happened. Because of this, strife between the two groups. The Philippine government encouraged Filipino Christians in Mindanao to form militias called Iliaga to counter the Moro insurgency. The Iliaga was responsible for the killings and other atrocities in Mindanao. They were responsible for the Manili massacre in June 1971, which killed 65 Muslim civilians in a mosque. Davao and Mindanao had a sizable population of Japanese immigrants. The migration of the Japanese plantation workers flourished in Davao even in the early period of 1900s. They controlled the entire abaca industry under the American regime. Davao became the biggest producer of abaca in the whole country during that period. Substantial commercial interests such as copra, timber, fishing, import and export trading prospered. The Moro hated these Japanese immigrants and fought the Japanese invaders when they landed at Davao and Mindanao. In the 1950s, there was an unprecedented influx of migrants from other parts of the Philippines to Mindanao, particularly to Davao, due to the economic opportunities it offered. In the 1960s, the banana and pineapple plantation industries became the source of development. However, social unrest was also prevalent. In 1969, Muslim scholar Nur Miswari established the Moro National Liberation Front or MLF, which begins an armed campaign to put up a separate Islamic state in the southern third of the country. Between the years 1972 and 1976, the fighting raged between government forces and the MLF, which is supported by some Muslim nations. Thousands were killed, with whole towns destroyed in violence. In 1976, under a deal brokered by the Organization of Islamic Conference or OIC, the MLF signed an agreement with the Marcos' administration to end hostile in exchange for the government working to grant greater autonomy in Muslim populated areas. In the year 1977, Miswari's deputy Hashim Salamat led a group of key commanders in splitting from the MLF. They were unhappy with Miswari's compromise and vowed to continue fighting for independence. Salamat later officially formed the MLF. During the presidency of the Marcos in the 70s, tourism was promoted particularly in Mindanao. Unfortunately, it failed to attract investors to come because of the peace and order situations in the region. In 1978, one of the MLF's fiercest ideologues, Salamat Hashim, split from the MLF and vowed to press ahead with the fight for independence Islamic State. Salamat and Murad Ibrahim, another prominent rebel commander, formed the MLF in 1981. After the 1986 EDSA People Power Revolution that ousted Marcos, the Aquino administration launched peace talk with the MLF in 1989. The Organic Act for the Autonomous Regions in Muslim Mindanao ARMM was signed into law. In 1996, Miswari on behalf of the MLF signed a final peace agreement with the Ramos government. That year, the MLF, which had long broken away from the MLF, also entered informal talks with the Ramos government. But the MLF peace project was put on the back burner, allowing the organization to recruit, establish big camps in central Mindanao, and become the most significant Muslim rebel movement. Former President Joseph Estrada mobilized the entire armed force to crush the MLF and bring down its seat of power in Camp Abu Bakar, central Mindanao in the 2000s. Former President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo reassumed negotiations with the MLF, taking a bold step in crafting a draft agreement that triggered widespread oppositions from lawmakers in various sectors, in which the Supreme Court later on declared an unconstitutional in response. Two MLF commander-led attacks across mainly Christian areas of Mindanao. In October 2012, the Aquino administration and the MLF signed a peace agreement in Malacanang. It marked the first the rebel group stepped into the country's seat of power. In March 2014, both parties signed the Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro CAB. The Bangsamoro is home to most of the country's Muslim or Moro populations, composed of many ethnic groups such as the Maranao and the Tausug, the Bangigi, users of the Vinta, as well as the collective group of Vietnamese tribes known as the Lumad. No matter your religion and beliefs you believe, at the end of the day, Mindanao is our home, and everyone is welcome here.